All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Safe Extreme Podcast. This is for the week of July 11th, 2021. I am Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and joining me as always, my co-host from Nexus Games, Sharky. How you doing? All all right. Well, we are in the midst of summer fever here. It's been like 85, 90 this entire week, along with massive thunderstorms. So we'll see how things last tonight. I guess how's the weather where you're at? No, I think it's just extreme here. But speaking about extreme extremes and safely extremes, our topic this week is going to be talking about the design traps or mistakes that we see from kind of the surprise hits, the lightning in a bottle kind of game releases. particularly from indie developers. And to Ratsail's comment, I spoke to someone from North Carolina when I did a library talk last week, and she said that it was burning hot at 75 degrees. I was just like sitting there going, yeah, I would kill for 75 degrees right now. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And a lot of what we're going to talk about, Shark just said, are kind of the things that when people look at the big successes of the industry, they tend to hone in on the wrong lessons from these games. Maybe it's a timing mistake, maybe it's a design issue that people ignored. But whatever the case may be, these are things that you don't want to base your game on. And specifically, you don't want to base your game on it in today's market. Because as we've said many times over, the market for video games changes almost on a like month by month basis these days. And a lot of that comes from how much game design evolves. That once somebody releases kind of like the new standard or the new mega hit, people try to rush to, take some, chunk or, take some percentage of that success. And you can pick any mega success, indie, AAA, doesn't matter, over the last 30 years, and and there are always going to be examples of that chase, as a rat's tail just said there. Now, in some cases, if you do something, out of left field, like if the major success goes right and you go left, you can sometimes carve out your own take on it. But far too many developers will see a mega successful game and will just try and copy that game wholesale. Maybe instead of a plumber, maybe it's a hedgehog. Or maybe instead of a hedgehog, it's a bandicoot. And even Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and it's a case of I think what you just said there about copying one thing that's very important to elaborate on. That is almost akin to, somebody copying somebody else's homework. They get the answer right, but they don't understand, why. It's the show your work kind of situation. And we've seen this again with so many big successes, and even just the games that just come out of nowhere. And I think another point that needs to be said, uh-oh, there may be something wrong with your sound. That was not part of my thing. Uh-oh. Could have been a Windows update that screwed that up. That happened to me the last time. You have to go to the gear properties on your mic and change the whatever the feed is.
Okay, test, test. Okay. Yeah, I just had to do it on OBS.
Yeah. Don't you love Windows updates?
Yeah. So apparently the sound is all botched on my side from up to this point. But Josh's stream can hear me perfectly fine because he's picking me up through oh
Speakers.
yeah.
Yeah. So, don't worry, I'll edit this part out when I go through it. But as I was saying, what we see developers do is that they, as Shark says, that they copy that one thing that they think the developer did that led to that success. If it was Darkest Dungeon, it was let's make a brutally difficult game, or let's make a very dark and moody dungeon crawler. If it was FTL, let's make our ship versus ship combat. And the problem with this is that if you just latch on to one thing or one thing you think is a success, oftentimes you ignore all the other work that went in that game succeeding.
Mm, yeah, so we have tons of examples, tons of things to dig into here.
Domain rants.
Yeah, and this episode's going to probably be pretty ranty.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an important topic because many people, especially new time developers, often fall into these traps. And I don't know, if there's one specific cause. I don't know if they're using it purely as justification for what they're doing, or if they legitimately think that this is the right path to take, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like the number one I always hear is Stardew Valley was developed by a solo developer, so I should develop my game solo. And that is not number one true, because he had a publisher, which means that he had a team of marketing people behind him, not just, but like if you take out the marketing side, yeah, he made the game solo. But thing is he is basically the Shaquille O'Neal or Michael Jordan or whatever famous basketball player of the game dev industry. Not everybody is amazing at art. Not everybody's amazing at programming. Not everybody's amazing at all this other stuff. And not everybody is that all at the same time. As a matter of fact, as far as I know, Concerned Ape is pretty much the only one.
Yeah. And I think at some point we need to rip the band-aid off of the myth that publishing and marketing are kind of, separate elements of game development.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's where that issue, that what you just said there, Shark, comes in with a lot of people who look at Concerned Ape as a sole developer who has marketing help. No,
Mm-hmm.
that's not how it works in today's market. If you have a publisher or you have, marketeers or, anyone who's doing the PR social media side, you're not a sole developer anymore.
Yeah.
You may have designed the game by yourself, but you are, releasing this game as a group. And far too many developers, I think, ignore, just what marketing and PR does to a game.
And how important it is, and how it's integrated with the rest of the development of the game. Whether you
Yep.
do it at the end or not, it has to go back and get integrated. It's not like it's a completely separate thing. It's I mean it's about as separate as music is, for a game.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yep.
Where music integrates the feel of the game. It integrates, how everything. Uh, it does a lot of things, but generally it's done at the end because you want to get everything that's in there to so that the music can perfectly sync into it. Marketing isn't something. saved for just the end. I mean, it often is, but you want to be marketing, you want to start your marketing plan from day one. Now, you're not doing your marketing, but you're doing your marketing plan. You want to
Yeah.
save your final push, your main push of marketing in the last 6 months. You generally around that range, depending on specific things. But 6 months is generally 6 months before launch is generally when you want to do that main marketing
Hmm.
push. But you want to
Yeah.
start your plan on day one.
Hmm. And like when I spoke with Laurent, that you'll want to be publishing, alpha 0.0000001 on Twitter the second you have a finish.
Mm-hmm.
No, when your game is at the point where you can wow, non-fans and non-friends and family with your game, then you want to shout it from the rooftops.
Well, you also don't want to shout it from the rooftops too soon, even if you do have that, because you don't want to run out of steam.
Yeah, and
Because if
that's
you
why you
run out of
need to.
steam, then you can't publish on Steam, obviously.
Hmm. You need more valves for that.
Yeah, yeah. You need more valves.
But let's go back to Stardew Valley because Stardew Valley again is one of those games that blew up for kind of the whole farming sim, life slice of life genre. I think is kind of like the popular term for it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the kind of one of the I guess the lines or the thread that's going to run through a lot of our examples today is when people will copy a game without doing anything else to it, or the differences are so minute that it doesn't really matter. It's Stardew Valley, but instead of a valley, it's a canyon, or it's Stardew Valley, but instead of we're farming, we're growing. I don't know. We're growing strawberries instead of corn or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we actually we got two things kind of running through. They're the exact same thing, but with one thing slightly changed, or when where there's literally nothing the same, but this one thing.
Hmm.
Is that safely extreme?
I think it's still in the extreme extremes.
All right.
But yeah, and I can talk. Let's talk a little bit about like the Minecraft example because I think this is a good segue into it because Minecraft is another case of a game that blew up, fantastically over the last. It feels like it's only been. It feels like Minecraft's been with us, since the dawn of time. But Minecraft's original release,
Wasn't it 2008, 9?
2011, according to Wikipedia.
But that might have
Oh, wait,
been,
oh, that was the console release. The
yeah,
original was released in May of 2009.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so Minecraft was like if we talk about kind of like the indie inspiration, Minecraft and Dwarf Fortress, which Dwarf Fortress will be another example we'll be talking about in the next few minutes. But those two games are kind of what a lot of people will kind of hone in on as I want to be the next Dwarf Fortress or I want to make the next Minecraft. And Minecraft is one of those games that I think, as we've said before, so much about what works and what doesn't work in the game industry is about the state of the market at that time.
Hmm.
If you are the absolute very first person to do X in a great way, you're kind of set. But the second and third people trying to do X are now behind the eight ball.
Yep. And the thing we always hear about Minecraft is Minecraft has crappy art, so I can just put crappy art in my game, right? That
Mhm.
that makes sense, right? Minecraft did it.
Or
Minecraft was wildly successful.
Minecraft did all these things wrong, so surely I can do it the same way.
Exactly. I mean, there's no problem with that, because like Minecraft released before Steam existed. It was a exactly the same marketplace because Steam hasn't had any kind of impact on anything at all. Like none.
Or the hundreds of clones of Minecraft for the last 10 years.
Yeah. But because Minecraft has crappy art, I can just put crappy art in my game and my game will sell millions and millions of copies because aesthetics don't matter in the current
Yeah.
market. None of that matters and none of that has anything to do with my success or anything. And I'll
Hmm.
just succeed because Minecraft will go like crap.
Yeah. And it doesn't work like that. And I want to get to the two comments, like from Rat's Tales comment about why it may feel hard work on a clone, is that you may feel like you are chasing at, it could be that you're chasing after Hearthstone a little too much. And you're kind of being, railroaded into that kind of design.
Mm-hmm.
And to a Robert's comment and to Ratzell's follow-up, yep. And again, that's the other point that when we talk about the first, there's always the asterisk that needs to go besides it saying, is the first game to blow up, not the first game of that design.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, a lot of people, when we talk about the first-person shooter genre, Doom was a game that was the more popular, blew open doors. But as we all know, it originally did return to Castle Wolfenstein, as that was the precursor to Doom. And you have to understand again that so much of what we're talking about in today's episode really comes down to developers not being able to understand why a game succeeded and why it failed. And if you don't get that, it becomes very hard to even come close to copying that game's success.
Yeah, and when you just take one aspect completely out of context of it to justify what you're doing, you're just hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And we've heard people that took let's say Dwarf Fortress for example, and used it as an example, saying that it since it started as a hobby game and then changed into a commercial game, any other game can do that. And the fact is, it can't because the main reason, one of the main reasons why Dwarf Fortress was able to swap over to a commercial game so easily is because while they were intending to make it a hobby game, it was designed like a commercial game. So the design was there, everything was there to be just the same as a commercial game. They just didn't go commercial with it, kind of thing, which is different from a game being made as a hobby that's being targeted at being a hobby, and then just all of a sudden you just flip a switch and now it's a commercial game. Yeah, that kind of thing causes catastrophic failure.
And it is very important to clarify that when we talk about exceptions like Stardew Valley, like Minecraft, like Dwarf Fortress, that you have to understand the word exception here. That they have often done things that are either wrong or, do not do's when it comes to game development or releasing a game that worked for them.
And it
And
worked for them because they went to buy a lotto ticket and they got struck by lightning 3 times on the way there. Lived to tell about it. Bought a lotto ticket, got struck by 3 times by lightning on the way home. Lived to tell about it. Got home, found out that they just won $1 billion on that lotto ticket, and then they made Minecraft, Stardew Valley, and all that. They made all those
mhm.
games.
And to Rat's Tail's comment, a lot of it really comes down to timing. I know developers, I think a lot of developers are scared of timing when it comes to game successes, but in a lot of cases, it's really true. If you are that one game that comes out that one time when the market is like in demand for something, all the issues with your game doesn't matter. We've seen this with Five Nights at Freddy's. It came out in 2014 just as kind of mainstream horror was dying. And the
Mm-hmm.
genre was, we were basically like scavenging for scraps for horror. We can look at it as Dwarf Fortress again, that there really wasn't a colony sim of that level of detail at that time.
Hmm.
Stardew Valley is the perfect example because a developer literally said there weren't any Harvest Moon style games on PC, and I just really want to make my own.
Yep.
And guess what? His game resonated with all those other people who said to themselves, hey, wouldn't it be nice if there was a Harvest Moon style game on PC? But therein lies that problem. There's now a Harvest Moon style game on PC. It's called Stardew Valley. There's now this, massive sandbox game called Minecraft. If you're trying to build your game just like them and nothing else, we've said this question before. Why should I play your version of a popular game when I can just play that popular game?
Yeah. And also, if you're just taking one aspect from it, whether, um, Dwarf Fortress started out as a hobby game, whether it's that, Stardew Valley it was made by a solo developer, except for it wasn't really. Whether it's that Minecraft had crappy art in it. If you're just taking any one piece of thing with no context, you're just, either trying to validate something you're doing wrong and you know deep down that you're doing it wrong, or you're trying to live up to bad examples. It's like, hey, that street punk over there on the corner, he killed somebody and he didn't get in trouble. I'm going to do the same thing. Don't cry to me when you get locked in jail, you know?
Yep. And to Rastell's comment, is there really nothing you can do to force a success? I think the short answer is no. The long answer is maybe. Like we've said, a lot of, I think, where people mess up when it comes to game development is not being able to critically examine why a game succeeds or fails.
Uh-oh.
This is why when I made my plans of game design. What? Can you hear me?
Audio's killing.
I think we lost Shark.
Test,
Shark
test.
swam away.
Test, test.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I was saying was, this is why when I made my post about the science of game design, I said that being able to study and critically examine design is becoming more and more of a vital skill because this is how you can start to understand what a game does right and more importantly what a game does wrong. And if you understand that, it allows you to kind of avoid those traps. Because like we've said, if you're the first of something, you don't care about traps. Nobody cares if there's a problem with Stardew Valley because where else are they going to go for that design at that time? This is a very interesting analog to the 4X grand strategy genre. That grand strategy games, like Paradox, has that market, lock, stock, excuse me, and completely nailed down. If there's any issues with those games, their fans don't care because there's no one else making that specific style of game.
And that's where Bethesda got off with all their bad stuff and all their bad
Mhm.
practices. But guess what? Now there's becoming games like Bethesda games that aren't made by Bethesda. And if Bethesda doesn't change their way, they're probably not going to be long for this world.
Yeah. And to another example, like what we saw with the whole getting over it. That getting over is such a lightning in a bottle moment that developers have been trying to chase that success for years now, and nobody has done it.
Yeah, I'm surprised it did it in the first place. It mainly did it because of outraged YouTubers.
And that was kind of like the first of that specific genre to hit the mainstream eye.
Hmm.
Among Us, a really big example. Among Us again, was a critical failure. It failed.
for
It
two
doesn't matter how
years.
many. Yep.
And then all
It,
of a sudden, magic, like magic, it popped it back.
hmm
It got resurrected. It got a phoenix down cast on it by a shit ton of YouTubers.
Somebody rolled a 20 on their D&D dice, and the game came back
But
to life.
before they rolled the 20, they walked out to get a lotto ticket, got struck by lightning 3 times, got a lotto ticket, walked back home, got struck by lightning three
And the
times.
dice got struck by lightning too.
Yeah. And then they got home, rolled that dice, and won a few $1 billion in the lottery. And then all of a sudden, it was a
Mhm.
successful game. Came from the
Yep.
dead.
But
I want to hit back on something you said a few minutes ago, though, with
mhm,
about maybe there's a way to force a success,
mhm,
and I would say there's no way to force a success. What there is, though, is you're taking bullets out of the barrel of your 1,000 shooter gun that's heading towards you,
mhm,
and some of those things would be good UI, some of it would be good art, and all kinds of other stuff, good design.
mhm,
But another thing that also does it is timing that we talked about earlier, because you need to be able to read the market and
mhm,
read timing and whatnot. And that's one thing I'm currently worried about, because right now I know that card games are all the rage. But what point does that fall under? And I think I've already started to see a sign of it falling under, because I've already heard that certain YouTubers say that they will never play a card game again on
oh,
stream.
jeez.
And
And
at the same time, I know that Cyberpunk is also something that's really hot right now. And right now, we haven't had any successful games under that label.
mhm,
Give you
and
time to stay on that one, you know,
mhm,
because
and
Cyberpunk 2077 is still a train wreck.
mhm.
I mean, it's been successful monetarily, but it's not a. Well, I mean, it would fit into this thing, Cyberpunk released as a completely buggy, broken mess with no features, so I can do that with my game too, right?
Mhm. But as we've said before, with all these examples, it only works if you're the first. Because what you just said there about kind of how trends, ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
I remember speaking to developers who really wanted to make a, spaceship style game, like a hardcore space simmy kind of design. And there's no other games like it out there, so they started to work on it. But here's what happened. Other people had that same idea as you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can beat you to market, not only with a better example of your game, but a far more polished example of it, you can end up, all dressed up with no place to go. And this is why, I think Rat's Tail's comment way at the start of our talk here about you don't want to chase the current trend is very true.
Yeah, because
Because,
by the time you get it out, the current trend won't be the current trend anymore,
and not only that, but unless you can somehow do what the current trend is doing like 100 times better,
or 100 times different.
people don't want to play that. And you'll see this, like, even in games that aren't direct copies, that people will go on their forum and saying, oh, it's a 2D side scroller? Oh, you're just copying Hollow Knight. Oh, it's a first person shooter? You're just ripping off Doom. Oh,
We
you put blocks on top of each other? Oh, you're just ripping off Minecraft.
we've seen similar stuff recently with Slay the Spire and Monster Train,
Hmm
because Slay the Spire came out first and it was wildly successful. The developer from Slay the Spire actually worked on Monster Train,
Yeah.
and Monster Train, in my opinion, is a way better game than Slay the Spire. Like, I bounced off of Slay the Spire after about, I don't know, like 2 or 3 hours. But like Slay the Spire, I mean Slay the Spire, but Monster Train, I played it for probably probably close to about 100 hours, and I was completely sold, and I still want to play more of it, but too many games, not enough time,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But like Monster Train did not perform very well at all compared to Slay the Spire. If you look at the percentage, I think what Slay the Spire has something like I don't remember. I think it's got about 10 times the review numbers as Monster Train, something like that.
Hmm. Let me see. Monster Train. Slave Spire has like 79,000 reviews. Monster Train has about 12,000.
So
Yeah.
that's like what 15%.
hmm And here's the other point. Slay the Spire wasn't the first deck building roguelike. We
Nope.
could say Dream Quest was. And Dream Quest is the game that a lot of the developers credit as their source of inspiration. And Dream Quest has 224 reviews right now.
Yep.
And I'm fairly sure most of you watching this right now, live recorded, have no idea what Dream Quest is.
I don't know what it is, for that
Mhm.
matter.
And again, this goes back to what we said. There's a difference between the first of an example
And
and
the
the
first to
first to
blow up.
blow up.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is no such thing, I think, these days as the 100% original game. I know developers will like to tout saying, we had this innovative system where characters on the left screen fight characters on the right hand side of the screen one turn at a time. Nobody's ever done that before.
Yeah. I remember somebody in your chat just a few minutes ago said we got to create original games. There is no original games. There is none. The closest thing we've had to original game in the last, I don't know, like what 10 years was probably Pokemon Go. But it was still a Pokemon game. And Pokemon games already exist, so it wasn't
And it's still
original.
based off of another design.
Yeah. And Minecraft was probably the most original before that, or Dwarf Fortress. But the fact is we already have Minecraft. It's called Lego. You know,
And that Miner game, or
yeah,
the one that was, yeah. And again, this is where a lot of developers mess up. Yeah, Ingress. This is where developers mess up when it comes to understanding why a game succeeds. Yeah, and The Simpsons did it before, as Elder
exactly.
just said. Or replace Simpsons with Nintendo, and you may be also accurate for the game industry.
You probably.
But you have when you are looking at a game, if you're trying to study the design of a title, you need to look at what that game did right, what it did wrong, and like I've said, why do people play this genre? Because if you can't answer those 3 points, you're not going to be able to come anywhere close to competing. Because most people, again, they don't understand the bad. And every game, even the most amazing examples, still probably did something wrong. Maybe their game's only 99.9% amazing. But you have to be able to understand all the mistakes and all those traps. Because if you try doing your game, guess what? You don't have that new game, shield that protects your title.
Yeah. And I remember somebody said in your chat about that the market is currently wanting hybrids,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that's true. Number one, but number two is unless you are a established developer, you should not be doing hybrids because they are out of your wheelhouse kind of thing. Not even I do hybrids yet. I have several hybrid designs in my back pocket, but I won't do them because I know better than doing them because if I do not know that genre good enough by making a game that is good enough in that single genre, doing and finding out what works firsthand with a successful game, then doing a mix up between genres will just lead to a whole lot of trouble.
And on the topic of, you know, copying success or understanding success or failure, this goes back to what another point that I said, that a lot of developers will say, "Oh, this game that sold has 1,000 reviews. It's a massive success. I should just build my game just like it." And again, no, you should not do that. And with the Slay the Spire example, I looked up a few of the other ones I enjoy, like Banners of Ruin. Banners of Ruin sits at just under 600 reviews right now. That's not good. That is definitely not good. It does not matter how great that game is, or if anyone wants to argue with me and say, "Oh, it's an amazing game." What we're talking about is how well this game performed in the market. And that is often very different from the quality of the design.
Mm-hmm. And I, you know, there's a difference between making enough money to actually fund a studio and making enough that you have some spare change on the side. That's completely separate things and shouldn't really conflate the two, because running a studio is very, very different from having spare change. And you couldn't consider having spare change be a success, because you need to, for it to be a real success, it needs to be the only thing you have to do. And you need to be able to do it over and over again repeatedly. And you need to not be doing it in one of these traps, like the solo trap of where you're just working by yourself and you're unless you're an omni talented person and you're a pro at everything, which not even Concerned Ape was that, because he had to have marketing. And as far as I know, he is the closest person in the industry to doing that. So, for you to
I
be able
think,
to do that, that would mean that you would be better than the best famous person we know of in the game industry, and,
mhm.
if you're watching the show trying to get advice, safe to say that's probably not true.
And like I said earlier, I think we need to just officially go on that statement that if you want to consider yourself a solo developer, marketing and PR have to be a part of that,
As
not
well as
just
no
game development.
assets,
Mm,
because assets are made by people, and
yeah.
people are teammates in some kind of way.
Hmm.
They were part of the development of the game. They weren't directly involved, but they were still involved in the development of the game, meaning that you are not solo.
Hmm.
If you're using assets, if you're going to a publisher, if you're getting anything outside of crowdfunding, which at which point you don't even need crowdfunding because there's nothing to buy because you're doing everything yourself. Unless you need to buy a computer or something. Well, a game engine is not part of the game. That is a tool. We're talking about, you have to be able to design a house, you have to be able to construct a house, you have to be able to do all this stuff. We're not saying that you need to forge metal and make your own hammers. We're not saying that you have to forge metal and create your own nails. We're saying, tools, are tools. We're talking about solo making a game, not solo making the tools for a game and then making the game itself.
Yeah.
You
And to Rat's Tail's comment, I think the big thing again is, can you answer those 3 points about what did Hearthstone do right, what did it do wrong, and what do people expect out of that genre, and see how that relates to your game. Again, if your game is just Hearthstone light, that's not
that's
going to be
failure.
enough. Yes.
Yeah,
If it's
because
Hearthstone, but all of this is different, then you may have something.
Maybe. It depends. Ask a lawyer.
Yeah. And again, like going back to the deck building genre, so many games have tried to copy Slay the Spire, and the Slay the Spire Monster Train is like the perfect point for what we're talking about. Monster Train literally had the guy or one of the people who designed Slay the Spire on their team to make improvements and iterate. It still did worse than Slay the Spire.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, of course, again, is that Slay the Spire was the first breakout success.
Yeah. I mean, basically, Monster Train is Super Slay the Spire, essentially.
Hmm.
And,
And the whole super thing only works if you're Nintendo.
yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing. Don't use that name. Because number one, it's not going to help you. Number two, you might have problems with Nintendo. Because Nintendo likes creating problems like that. Anything with names.
And I want to go back, I want to touch on Dwarf Fortress for a second. Because another point that people will argue is that, Dwarf Fortress, or that, you know, why should I, try to improve on it? Or why should I try and make things better? If Dwarf Fortress succeeded like this, why should I?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like we've said, mistakes and failures don't apply if you're the number one game in town. If you are the best example of something and there's no one else on the market, nobody cares if your game has bugs or has problems to it. But if we look at kind of the PUBG Fortnite example, that PUBG was kind of the first breakout hit. Again, there were games like H1Z1, what was it, King of the Hill, and so on. But PUBG was the first game to kind of start to blow up in the mainstream until Fortnite came along. And what Fortnite did was say, we're going to do PUBG, but we're going to do it so much more polished and so much, newcomer friendly that Fortnite overtook it. And
And so much more publishing power behind it.
yeah,
And and actually better and more gameplay because like in PUBG you can't build your own structures.
hmm
You have that Minecraft extra, push in there from that. And like Fortnite, despite, despite that, PUBG seceded wildly kind of thing, it died very, very quickly when Fortnite came out. And the reason why is because, the thing is when you're the first to blow up, you're generally like concreted. But they were not because Fortnite was right behind them immediately. And Fortnite had so much better stuff that just put PUBG to shame.
and Rod Sale said it was an amazing pivot. Yeah, like again, if we're talking about exceptions to rules, like Fortnite is the king of exceptions.
That's an exception
Like
to the exception.
yeah, like it should not have succeeded. Like it that that's not getting struck by lightning. That's getting struck by like a nuclear bomb, and
Three times.
evolving and becoming even more powerful.
Mm-hmm. That's you walk to the store to get the lotto ticket, and you get struck by three nuclear bombs on the way there. You buy the lotto ticket, you walk home, get struck by three nuclear bombs on the way home. You get home, you mutate into a superhuman, Superman, and and every other comic character combined into one, and you create the ultra successful game that makes every bit of money that exists in the world.
And again, with Fortnite, how many Fortnite clones have come out? How many are still around?
Mm-hmm.
And the other point I want to bring about Dwarf Fortress, because somebody I'm sure will mention that they're getting their own release. And there's some important points we need to kind of clarify with that. One, the Dwarf Fortress release is being handled by a publisher. Kid Fox is, doing it for Tarn and I forget his name, Zach Adams?
I think so.
I'm sure, again, like 10,000 Dwarf Fortress fans will yell at me in the chat.
Yeah, which means
But
they are not doing it as a hobby project anymore. It,
the second,
Kit Fox is doing it as a commercial project. And number two is that they were a duo, and now they have a pretty large team behind them now.
yeah, and another point about this is that with the release of Dwarf Fortress, a major point of what kind of Kit Fox is giving to them is that all the approachability and UI UX issues that were in the original version of Dwarf Fortress, they're trying to stamp that out. They want to make the UI better. They're updating the art, which is a huge point about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people will argue, and I'm sure the hardcore fans are going to say, who cares about art? Who cares about UI? We're enjoying the game as it was. But
You
again,
are
there's
also
that.
weren't paying for the game how it was.
There you go. There's a difference between, again, the first of an example that's free and you trying to charge for that.
Mm-hmm. And that's another problem with hobby games evolving into not hobby games, commercial games, and there's all kinds of issues with that. And Kit Fox is addressing tons of them, but the fact is only because the design that they originally did for Dwarf Fortress fit that general design of a commercial game. Could it even be converted in any kind of realistic way, period? Where most hobby games are not designed in any kind of way that they would be converted into a commercial game. Because, like, if you look at most hobby games kind of thing, what it would require for that to become a commercial game would be make a new game based off of the original, inspired by the original, but not the original.
Mm-hmm. And to Wrath Tales come about Numoria, it sits at 2,731 reviews. So even if it was the more approachable Dwarf Fortress, I am very sure it did not come close to Dwarf Fortress's numbers.
Yep.
And we are probably getting close to an hour for our talk. Again, this is one of those things that can either go very long or very short. And I want to bring up, there's two examples I want to bring up.
There's still
Uh,
some more I want to bring up too.
yeah. The other one I wanted to bring up, like kind of my two are related in a way. The first one is rogues or roguelike inspired games. As we've said, the roguelike genre is one that has exploded in terms of those mechanics and systems being adopted. I think this kind of goes back to that comment. I think Robert said this earlier about kind of the genre mashups. Taking roguelike elements and applying it to whatever, deck builders, action games, RPGs, colony sims, whatever, like that. But for many people who adhere to the traditional or classic roguelike, we still see them kind of ignoring anything and everything that has to do with modern UI and UX design. We
Mm-hmm.
played that roguelike, I think it was last week or the week before, that there's no mouse interface. It's just all keyboard. And this is again one of those mistakes that we see developers make that because something worked 20 years ago, nothing has ever been iterated on. There's been no advancements. The game industry is just the same as it was in 1987, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Everybody's still playing on their NES, and Super Nintendo is brand new. Nothing has changed since then. PCs are just over just really big calculators that fill up like an entire room. That's exactly how things are right now. There's zero difference between now and then. None. Steam doesn't exist. Internet doesn't exist. None of that. None of that. It's just all the same. Not. It's we could travel back to that time period, And you would find Josh, and he would look exactly the way he is right now because he's born before the early thousands. And you would look around, and nothing else would change either. Nothing, not a thing.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like those like old photographs, and you see like the character looks exactly the same in every picture, like Wolverine.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. It exists on the internet. Yeah, there's some reaching there. And the point about this is that you cannot design in a vacuum. And like we said, like this thread that runs through this entire cast this week is that the market changes. What worked a month ago is not going to work today, or 5 months, or a year, or a decade. And if you willingly don't look at what people are expecting today, you're not taking bullets away from the chamber, you are adding them to the chamber when you're releasing your game.
yeah. And if you're using excuses that, if you're making up any excuses, Minecraft's arts, suck, so I can make my art suck. If you're, saying that Dwarf Fortress was just a hobby project and it converted into a commercial project just by putting it on sale, and there was no design that was specifically for, made, set up to be commercial. If you have any of these excuses kind of thing, then you might as well count your game as a failure before it even launches because it's going to fail. Because if you're making excuses kind of thing, whether it's on purpose or not, you need to look on the inside and find out why you're doing it, stop doing it, address the issues, and design around that. Because if you're making these excuses, you're like, you're putting a bomb, a speed bomb on your bus, and the second and it's set to the second you hit 2 miles an hour, the bus is going to explode in a nuclear explosion, and then you take the brake off and you go into gear, and before you move like 2 inches, boom, there goes the game. It's done. Because you made these excuses, whether on purpose or on accident. You sabotaged yourself into
Yep. And
failure.
and some people will again argue, well, I'm just designing what the genre expects out of it. But the thing is, if you for a genre to survive, it needs to evolve. And this is something that we've said before about the adventure genre. That everyone will say they love, the games from Wadget Eye or what was it? I'm trying to think of a few other ones like Strangeland that came out a few months ago. But when we look at these games in terms of their overall success or their overall reach, it's often very poor. Unavowed right now, I love that game. I'm sure anyone watching this who's played that game loves it as well. It has 1,254 reviews. That's that is a market failure.
Mm-hmm.
I know people don't want to hear that, and people will argue. I think this goes back to what Rat's Tail said earlier that 1,254 reviews to a small developer. You might as well just say that's 20 billion reviews because that's what they want to get. But like we've said over the course of this cast and many of my talks and stuff we've done here, that in order to succeed, you have to be able to grow. If your company is only bringing, let's say, 1,000 reviews for every one of your games, and that's it, that's not good. It goes back to what Shark said a few minutes ago about the difference between having a game that is a studio success versus a game that is just, giving you pocket change.
Yeah. And a game that's giving you pocket change isn't going to run a studio. It's not.
Unless you are a super teeny tiny studio,
of one
But
person that somehow can succeed and you're falling into the other trap. So
yep.
basically, only if you fall into a trap can you succeed at the other trap, you know?
hmm And like this is something that when I spoke with Jake Burgett about, that Jake's games have done well, being very, very small, very niche-driven games. But the reason why they do well is that he tempers his expectations. He knows none of his games should be like a 5 to 10 year development cycle. There is no way in hell they are going to earn back the amount of money they would put into them. He knows, what to focus on and what to cut. I mean, again, people like Jeff Vogt would be an example. Like Jeff Vogt has not had a commercially mega successful game, but he knows what his market is. He knows what they want, and he knows how to design a game as cheaply as he can to hit those checkboxes.
Yeah. And Rustel says that he would love some pocket change, and I would say you probably don't. Because if you aim for pocket change, then you're probably going to get less than pocket change. And if you do happen to get pocket change, you're probably just going to forever get pocket change because you're going to put yourself, if you succeed in getting that pocket change, you're going to pretty much put yourself in a pattern to forever get pocket change and never anything more because you're building in such a way that is set for that. And you'll just be with pocket change forever, and it will be a ton of work to get that pocket change.
And
And what if you want to be a successful studio, never ever ever aim for pocket change
and this
because
is why
that's just
good.
going to lead to failure.
And this is why we say that running a studio is magnitudes more different than working on it as a hobbyist or in your part time. Because if you are having to rely on this game not only to succeed, but to pay your bills, pay your employees' bills, and keep the studio running, you have to be able to, you know, put something together that's going to work. You can't just say to yourself, you know what, I'm just going to experiment on game ideas for the next 3 years if you have 10 employees who want monthly checks from you.
Mm-hmm. And Rastel said I sold 50 copies of Candy Raid on the Switch and didn't even have to pay for a dev kit. Would you think Nintendo is going to give you another dev kit after you only sold 50 copies? And I would probably say probably not. So you better use that dev kit while you got it and better make something that sells way more copies because Nintendo may not even let you on your platform anymore after that kind of performance because like do you want to be basically banned off of Nintendo for life because you did that?
I
Because
think Nintendo
Nintendo
isn't
is
capable.
not against it.
I think at this point, Nintendo has just taken up the same thing as like Sony and Xbox, and are just like, "You're an indie, come on in." But that also means that you are now going to be buried by everybody else.
And if you sink and you don't swim, they ain't going to be interested in dealing with you again, especially in giving you free stuff. Why would I? Why would I, as a say I'm Sony or Nintendo or any other big platform holder, why would I give you a $300 or $500 or $800 dev kit if you only sold that many copies? Why would I even allow you on my storefront? Just cluttering it up if you're only going to sell that many copies. I could easily just remove you and sell like 20 times more copies of any other game because of that. And the thing is why would I want you even on my platform, even if you did pay for the dev kit? Why? And the answer is there's no reason for it other than out of the kindness of their hearts or the mismanagement of their company. One of the two, you know. So, like, either they're going to make a mistake on their side and mismanage your company and allow you to keep on going, or they're going to do the smart thing and cut you off and never allow you again, because that would be the smart thing to do after you only sold 50 copies. And that's the way marketing and promotion and all that stuff works, and how exposure works. And you're basically, in a very deep dark hole right now, and you have a very limited time, if any time, if the time hasn't already passed, to dig your way out of it, or it's, you know you're up to, getting lucky with them doing bad stuff for their platform.
And you have to be able to grow from these designs. Like we've said, people don't want to be playing the same game. If you want to use, what you've learned, both good and bad, to build something better, that's what you want to do when it comes to these designs. And returning to the roguelike genre, for example, that back in, I think it was 2012, one of the breakout successes was Dungeons of Dreadmore. And the reason why Dungeons of Dreadmore worked was because they said to themselves, let's make a roguelike, but let's remove as much of the fiddly and cumbersome elements that are known for the genre, and let's make something better than that. And while it wasn't, Minecraft levels of success, it still got, 3170 in terms of reviews back in 2011. And it was a really good first game from that developer.
Mm-hmm. And the other aspect of what I was talking about with Rat's Tail is that platforms do what they want. Steam, you know, for a long time curated their stuff very, very hard, but then they slowly slacked off on that and opened up the gates bit by bit, and now the gates are completely wide open, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And they let any kind of shovelware that you want on there, and because of that, what they do is they, put an algorithm in that will specifically kill indie games. Because if you don't sell well in your first week, in your first day, and you don't get enough wish lists before you even release the game, they're going to bury your game very, very hard. Nobody will ever find it, and you won't get that pocket change. That's the reason why aiming for pocket change won't get you pocket change. And if you're aiming for a, full experience kind of thing, where you're not a full commercial project and not pocket change, you still may not get pocket change. But fact is you were going to yeah, you're going to just sink, if you don't end up making money. So as a commercial studio, so you have to find a way to do it. And many studios die because of that, because they weren't able to. And some of them succeed because they were able to. And that's the reason why we always say never depend on a single game. Make sure, as a commercial product, make sure that you can make a second game. So if the first one fails, you can learn lessons from it and then potentially succeed in your second. And hopefully
And
even your third, if you have enough, quote unquote steam to go around.
and to Rascal's comment, like Candy Ray was not a bad game. It was not badly designed. But as we've said, and this is something that every developer needs to understand. There's a difference between the quality of the game versus the commercial success of a title. And this is what we've said before about a lot of the games. Like on my thumbnail, I included Ghost Simulator. Ghost Simulator, from a mechanic and gameplay standpoint, was not a good game. It was intentionally buggy. It was one of those titles that should not have succeeded.
It's
But
not
when
bug,
I
it's a
look it up,
feature.
yeah, but when I look it up on Steam, it has 43,220 reviews. And again, a lot of what goes into the success of a game is not always about the design. The design the design keeps people interested in it. But you need to get
It,
that foot in the door before that.
nobody buys a game based off of design because
Mhm.
people buy games on Steam. There is nothing on the design of the game on Steam other
Mhm.
than if you can you know introduce a genre in your trailer of what your game is, which is really not really the design. And you can put a few features in the about this game page, which most people don't even read, and most people screw up there about this game page. But features are not designed. You can have really good features that are really poorly designed. So, I mean, there's no actual design on the Steam page, but people buy from the Steam page. They're not buying for design. Good game
Mhm.
design prevents people from refunding. It,
Mhm.
it, it, and like so many other things also does that, but it does not make them buy. And that's the point about marketing, being an integral part of game development that we were talking about
Mhm.
earlier, about how that is so important that it from day one. And it's not just your marketing plan, it's your art aesthetics. If your art aesthetics is not high enough level, it doesn't matter if they're not bad but not good, then it's it's set for failure. if
Yeah.
if it's good but not great, it's also set up for failure on Steam. If it's great, you might squeak by on Steam. Might.
And don't
If it's
and
amazing, then you have a really good chance.
and don't forget how much the name of a developer becomes a factor in this. And it's like we've said before about when it comes to game development, why you shouldn't build everything around one game. Because as you grow in terms of notoriety and fame as a developer, your name becomes a part of that marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what you make. Again, Clay Entertainment. Clay at this point, Clay is probably up there, like along with Kid Fox, as developers who can get marketing just by their name alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
why we've said that if you're starting out, you don't want to put your name as the very first thing you see on a trailer because nobody knows who you are. But guess what? Red Hook can just stamp their name for like the first 20 seconds of the Darkest Dungeon trailer, and it's going to work for them.
Yeah. You could put Play Entertainment, Kid Fox Games, Red Hook, Bethesda,
Nintendo.
Nintendo, Xbox,
Hmm.
Sony on any game, and the game, just by doing that, the game is pretty much already a success. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter how bad the design is, don't matter how bad the art is, it doesn't matter how bad anything is. It is pretty much guaranteed a success at that point, just by having that name put on there. But if you put, you know, um, I don't know, insane
Still just
monkey
game
climbs up
design.
a tree studios kind of thing, nobody's going to care. If you put, um, mega super duper studios on there, nobody's going to care. If you put any non-famous name on there, nobody's going to care.
I hope there's not really a mega super duper game studio out there who heard that.
I hope there's not either. I'm just trying to make up random names.
But
Turns
yeah,
out, it turns out they're like the super famous developer that's made, like
oh, great.
50 of these
Yeah.
games that we've played.
Shark
They,
gets canceled from a random name.
it turns out they made G plus, kind of thing.
Hmm. And yeah, like we've said, just because you have an amazing game these days is not enough for success. I mean, we could certainly review Candy Raid's store page. I mean, I looked at it very quickly, and I can already tell that it probably is not going to get a high grade from us. And that's not, again, an attack on the design of the game or the quality of the game. But if you are trying to succeed and thrive in this industry, you have to go above and beyond. You
Hmm.
can't, like we said, you can't just say, I'm going to make a platform where just like Super Mario World in 1990, and I expected to sell 800,000 copies.
Or I'm going to make a card game just like Hearthstone.
You have to be able to do something different or worlds better. In many cases, you have to do both. It
Yeah.
has to be original and it has to be better in some aspect.
And you
And
also have to ask yourself, why did Hearthstone succeed? You know,
what's failing about Hearthstone?
hmm and one of the things that really caused, part of the reason why Hearthstone took off the way it did is because it's free to play.
Hmm.
Because it's free to play, it was able to get a lot of people to actually play it because they didn't have to buy it.
And
So,
don't forget, it also has Blizzard attached to it.
yeah. But, since it doesn't cost anything, they are they have an easier time, a world's easier time to be able to get people to actually play it. Because, people who didn't care about Blizzard before Hearthstone came out, now do care about Blizzard. And the reason why they do care for it is because they were not stopped by having to pay $20, $50, or whatever for the game, and they were able to get into it free. That low barrier entry got them in, and then they got hooked. Now, and see, when you have multiplayer games more than any other game is reliant so heavily on player numbers. I mean, of course, you need player numbers in a single player game because if you don't have player numbers, then you didn't have any sales.
Hmm.
But multiplayer games, you have to have constant players at all times forever because the if you don't, then there's nobody to matchmake with. And if there's nobody to matchmake with, then you can't
No
play the
community.
game. And if you can't play the game, then you're going to uninstall it or refund it if
Yeah.
you did pay for it. And that's the reason why you don't charge for that kind of game generally, because if you do, then far less people are going to pick it up because it costs $5, $10, $20, $30, $80,
Why
however
should I
much.
pay $50 when I get Hearthstone for free? Or Gwent?
Mm-hmm.
Or, Faria for a time?
Well, you get stuff for it,
Hmm.
but you get stuff for free from those games.
Yeah.
So why would they pay for it?
And again, this is why you have to be able to examine a genre.
And you
You
don't
have
have
to.
the same marketing power that Blizzard and all these other companies have.
Mhm. Yeah, like again, if tomorrow Clay announced, "Hey, we're going to make our own card-based, uh, TCG or CCG game," they got their name behind that.
Mm-hmm.
They could make a. Who knows? Clay could make a chargeable CCG, but again, that's because they have that clout. As an indie developer, you
As an
don't.
unknown indie developer.
Yeah, you don't have clout. You don't have that part of marketing you can fall on. It's why for our shows on Indie Inquiries that usually the more famous a developer is, the less work that goes into their store page. Because,
They don't
their
need it.
name is their name is their marketing. If you're an unknown developer, your store page has to be 50 to 100 times better than anybody else if you wanted to stand out.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're saying is to make it as an unknown indie, it is way, way harder than it is as a AAA or as a famous indie. The
Yeah.
less known you are, the harder it is because the less people care. I mean,
Hmm.
like, if let's say if if George Clooney, for example, sneezed and farted at the same time, probably a lot of people would care about that. But if El Gordo did that, nobody would care.
Yeah.
And the fact is if nobody cares, nobody's going to care to talk about it. Nobody's going to want to quote unquote buy into the story or buy your game. So
Yeah.
because you're unknown, you are at a disadvantage. And when you are at a disadvantage, you have to do better than everybody else.
Look
And
at Dead Cells. Motion Twin has been around, I think, for over like 20 years, or even a little less than that. But nobody heard of them. And when they released Dead Cells, that was like above and beyond at that time for action roguelike design. And it blew up for them. And now they're in that position like Clay, like Red Hook, and so on. People not caring about you. And here's my final example, and then I'll throw it to you, Shark, and this will be my final point I want to make. The other side of roguelike, or of developers who are kind of adhering too much, are the modern retro developers. The bad examples, I should say. The ones who say to themselves, oh, because Shovel Knight looks like a NES game, I'll just make a NES looking game and I'll sell just like Shovel Knight. Or, it's 16-bit, so I'll just make the worst looking 16-bit game and people will buy on nostalgia alone.
mm-hmm.
No, that doesn't work. And this again goes back to our point. They are copying the wrong elements as to why these classic games work and why they didn't work.
And
I
in the
will
classic games, they didn't have crappy looking pixel art. At least, not in the good games. In the LG N games, they did.
LJN, yeah.
Yeah, but in Nintendo games, no, those have good pixel art.
Yeah, like I don't want to play a modern retro game that I only have 3 lives, and if I die, I lose an hour's worth of progress. Yes, that was the case back in 1989. It's not the case in 2021.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it is the case. It's just not the good case.
Hmm.
It's the bad case. That was
And
acceptable back then. It's not
mhm,
acceptable now.
yep.
It
And
is a
as the
red
shark
flag.
said, like when it comes to pixel art, there is a difference between bad, good, and fantastic pixel art. And if your game is on the bad side, like if an LJN game looks better than your game today, nothing else that you do is going to matter.
Mm-hmm. And if if you're limiting yourself to hardware, to old hardware, your values, you're stepping into a dangerous area because in number one, unless you have a really good artist, a really amazing artist for that old limitation, you're done. But even if you do have a really good artist, you may still be done because you're falling into the old traps, and you need to not have those limitations.
Yeah,
Certain limitations are good on you, certain ones are not.
yeah.
Limiting your art to be bad is not good.
And like we've said, when it comes to pixel art, there are fantastic examples of it.
Like
There are
Stardew Valley.
games, yeah. We can even go like Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight looks very much like a high quality NES game.
But
And
I'm pretty sure they did not stick to the limitations of the NES.
yeah,
Because I'm pretty sure most, if not all, the colors that are in Shovel Knight were not possible in the NES.
yeah. Like one of the examples I turned to was that Treachery and Beatdown City game that has this very innovative like beat 'em up RPG style design. But when you look at the screenshots of it, It looks like one of the poor examples of a game released in like 1988. And if anyone wants to argue with me about that point, it's sitting at 28 reviews and it's over a year old.
Mm.
So it did
It,
not resonate with people.
it's a very dead game. Was the
And
gameplay on point though?
it was decent. It was different. I we only played it like for like one night. I've been waiting for it to go on a deep enough sale to get it. And there's I hate to say because I said a final point, but here's my final point. Trade shows and awards from them really don't mean much to the mainstream market. Because I see a lot of these games that do poorly, they'll have, like top games shown at PAX or, came in number 5 at, show in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
That means nothing to the consumer these days.
Yeah, you know what matters just as much as consumers, if not more,
Mm-hmm.
is, random person from your review page, gave this game, 11 out of 11 dolphins. And you could literally put that in your trailer and it will do just as well, if not better, than the actual, award thing because it's funny. And that's the one thing the other one doesn't have for it.
And this is also why consumers don't necessarily care, at least in terms of buying, if Markiplier or PewDiePie or any big name YouTuber or streamer covers your game. Because, like we've said,
Unless they're
there's
fans of that YouTuber.
yeah,
And
but
even
I
then, it's
don't think
very limited.
yeah, like I've seen games that are covered by Markiplier that his video may get 800,000 reviews, maybe even or 800,000 views or more on. But then when I go to the store page for the game, it may only still have like 100. Like
Yeah.
here's an example: House. I really liked House, that horror game we played last or a few months ago. Markiplier has covered. I'm pretty sure a few other major names have covered it. It only has 400 reviews right now. So even though, Markiplier's coverage is huge, that's not translating to sales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can have any creator cover your video, cover your game, and benefit basically nothing from it. Tim
Mm-hmm.
Rustwick, that we used to do the roundtable with, he had an instance of that where Game Theory covered his game. The name of it's slipping my mind.
I always butcher the name of it.
You could start it off. I could finish it.
Phasmophobia, phobia, something like
That
that. Philophobia,
philophobia, yeah.
yeah.
And he covered it in a live stream and he had a lot of viewers. I went over
Mm-hmm.
and looked at that stream and I was like, dang. Well, Tim got lucky there. And then, he revealed later that sales, as far as he can tell, did not change at all. Like
He's
not
sitting at
not even a small spike. Not even like like he was at 200 and then he shot up to like 250 or something, or
he's at
210.
41 reviews right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and that again is why like people fail, I think, to understand what success means or what are the factors. I have said this in a lot of my pieces I wrote. A major YouTuber or streamer covering your game is not the reason why your game succeeded.
Well, it could
That
be, but it's not likely to be. I mean, it's the
that
reason why whatchamacallit,
Among
Among
Us,
Us became successful. It's
but again,
why
Among Us
it's
is an
why
exception.
yeah, and it's why Getting Over It became famous.
Hmm.
But that's it's probably also the reason why Five Nights at Freddy's became famous.
Hmm.
But
But
like it's all these exceptions that get the other exception. So it's like dual exceptionism. It's an exception
yeah,
inside of exception.
exception inception. Say that
Yeah.
10 times fast.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, and again, there's always other factors that come into play. But just saying to yourself, oh, if Markiplier covers my game, it'll become an instant success. No. The reason why Markiplier will probably cover your game outside of getting paid to do it is because your game is already successful in some way.
Or your game is
Again,
really bad and he wants something to cringe to.
hmm or Rage 2, like with
Mm-hmm.
Getting Over It, or Pogo Stuck, or Struck, whatever it was called.
Yeah, it's about making his content more interesting because, like, viewers like seeing him suffer. Like viewers like seeing Josh suffer in games. And, you know, you play a bad game and you suffer, and then people like it. You know, people like to see you in pain. Although it's kind of like the inverse with Josh to a point because, you know, Josh does suffer so much on purpose that we really want him to see him not suffering.
Is that safely extreme right there?
I think so.
Yeah. But like we've said, just because a big name covers a game, just because you're copying, something that did well, that rarely translate into success.
Almost never. You have to
Mhm.
become an exception
And
for that to work, pretty much.
and again,
And
I want to give a very quickly a shout out to Loco Molito, who his whole brand is making modern retro style games, but he has that eye of design for modern day elements to it. So there's a difference between playing Curse Castilia versus playing Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection. And if you don't understand that, you can look at both of those games and say, oh, they're just very hard 2D platformers, cut, print, we're done. But there are better elements in Cursed than there were in other games that try to emulate Ghosts and Goblins.
mm-hmm. And I want to hop onto another thing. Is
Mm-hmm.
you know many people use Undertale as an example, and they're like, Undertale did well, and it had bad art, so I can make bad art in my game. And number one, Undertale didn't have bad art; it had very limited art.
It was very
And
stylized that
yeah,
way.
and don't mistake limitations and stylization for being bad. Number one. Number two, even if it was bad, you couldn't say because that game did something bad and succeeded, I can do too. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's again the I seen a street punk over there kill somebody and he got away with it. So I can go over and kill this guy and get away with it too, right? It's perfectly fine, and no, it's not. And we also see the people drawing Five Nights at Freddy's. Also another one is Five Nights at Freddy's has bad art, so I can do bad art too. Five
Or it's
Nights at Freddy
frustratingly
had very
difficult.
basic gameplay, so I can too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly why Five Nights at Freddy's um got successful, but I know why it didn't get successful. It didn't get successful because it has crappy art. It didn't get successful
Mm-hmm.
because it's got very limited gameplay. I don't know why it did, but I certainly know why it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And people are using that as reasons to make their game fail.
Yeah.
And if you want your game to fail, make your excuses. Make your excuse that all these that Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale and Minecraft had bad art. If you want to if you want to go down the bad road of being a solo developer, say that number one, Stardew Valley was a solo developer, even though he wasn't, because he had a whole team of marketing through the publisher, which is definitely a part of game development and an integral part from day one that you should be thinking about. And number two is think that because he did it, because he is the Michael Jordan of game dev, that's very omnipotent person that can do baseball and basketball kind of. He can do art and programming and music and all these things, and but he can't do marketing. But, but because he can do all those things, you assume that you can too. And as far as I know, he's the only one in the industry, that can do all those things, at a adequate enough level for the current marketplace, which is ever changing and will eventually outgrow where he's at when he released that game. And, maybe when he released Stardew, probably if he released Stardew Valley today, it would probably fail because there's other Stardew Valley games out there, you know, and, if you have your Dwarf Fortress, saying Dwarf Fortress, make an excuse that Dwarf Fortress was made originally as a hobby game, and then now it's a commercial game, and I can just take any hobby game and convert it over to commercial game, no problem. If you're making these excuses, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you're, setting up, I'm going to make this exact game, but a light version of it, or a worse version of it, or a version that looks bad, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You're all this is doing is setting yourself up for failure. And if you do not want to fail, do not do these. Do not cling to these things. I'm not saying you can't do solo development. I know a lot of people will probably think I am, but I'm not saying you can't do solo development. I'm saying that you should try to do solo development or not solo development, team based, when you're learning, and then when you're going to make a commercial product, try very, very hard to get away from that. And as we talked about before, using assets is not solo because somebody else worked on your game indirectly. If you're using a publisher, then you're not solo. If you're paying somebody outsourced labor, you're not solo. The only way you're solo is if you're doing everything yourself, game wise, not tool wise. Tool wise is a completely different thing because you don't have to make your own tools. You do if you're solo though. You have to make 100% of your own game. No assets, no nothing. But like I said, solo development is a trap when it comes to commercial games. And you really want to avoid that trap as much as possible. And it's a hard trap to avoid, I'll be honest, because it's hard to get a team together. It's hard to
Yeah.
get money
Game
for a
development is
team.
hard.
Yeah. Game development is hard. It's not easy. But like you you need to try to avoid these traps. Don't make excuses for yourself. If you're a solo developer, that shouldn't be a badge of honor kind of thing. That's a that's a red flag kind of thing.
And I guess to add on this from my final point, again, people don't care about your story. They don't care if you're a sole developer. They don't care if you spent 20 minutes on this game or the last 30 years on this game. They care about how it looks in the market and what is the market like today. So maybe that game that took you 20 years to make could have been a 10 out of 10 Game of the Year winner 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the market shifts and it continues to change based on all the games that we've spoken about. When a game does break out, it changes the conversation. When, Five Nights blew up, people started making more horror games. That led to stuff like Lost in Vivo and, stuff like we saw from the Haunted PS1 collection and Dread X. And then those elements gave way to Capcom redoing Resident Evil and it's succeeding. But again, all this happens at these moments in time. And it's why, as we've said, you cannot chase the current trend. If somebody wants to make a game like Resident Evil, it better be, so much better than what Capcom could have ever done. Because
Or
if it's
different.
not, yep, you're not going to succeed. And when we say success, again, we're not talking your game sells 500 copies or it has 1,000 reviews on Steam. We're talking success as in this game not only paid for the development of your title, but it's also paid the development for your next game.
Yeah. Or profit
Mm-hmm.
if the next game's already paid for because your last game was a success.
Yeah.
And Nikita says, Nikita, I hope I screwed that up. I don't know which way it goes, but says that it's easy, but with experience, but marketing is nearly impossible. And that's very not true. Marketing is not near impossible. Marketing, the thing
It's a
is it's a skill,
yeah,
and if you don't have the skill, it is near impossible. If you don't have the skill of programming, programming is near impossible. If you don't have the skill for art, art's near impossible. If you don't have the skill for writing, writing is
and
nearly impossible. If you don't have the
and this
skill
is
for game
why
design, it's
you
near
get
impossible.
people to help you.
Yeah,
This is why, again, if you're not good at marketing, it's good to find somebody who's good at marketing.
yeah.
If you're not good at programming, get a programmer. And this is the point I think we need to clarify. Like, we say this stuff like it's simple. It's not. We both know that it's very hard to find a quality programmer,
Oh yeah,
quality PR, quality developer. This stuff is difficult.
yeah. I mean, like how many? So I had to hire a programmer, and I've been hiring multiple programmers since what was it, mid 2018, and it took me about a year and a half, 2 years before I finally found a programmer to join my team that I could afford and work for me and is outputting work. And that just happened 3, 4 months ago. And now we have a playable version of Neon Continuum, which has been one of the main holdups for so long. And it took me almost 2 years, if it didn't take me 2 years, to find and hire that person. Part of it's because I didn't have money enough. I didn't have a lot of money to pay. Part of it's because I don't have a lot of connections. Part of it's, well, I do have a lot of connections, but a lot of connections is different from having enough connections to find somebody, and I didn't have enough connections to find somebody, obviously. So like, there's so many issues there that is, I mean, it is as easy as hiring a programmer, but hiring a programmer isn't an easy thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to want to hire a programmer. It's not easy to actually do it and find somebody proper. I mean, I ended up hiring, I don't know, like 6 or 7 different people that did not work out, and before I found the one that did. And I did not hold, well, one of them I held on to for a long time, but most of them I did not hold on to for a long time because I knew they weren't going to work out. So I, got rid of them as soon as possible, you know. And same thing with artists. I have hired so many artists, kind of thing. And I have hired, I don't know, probably like 10, 15, 20 artists for Neon Continuum. And only one of those actually worked out. And luckily, that was a long time ago. Sadly, that one didn't keep on working out, so I have to find a new artist. And I've been looking for a new artist for, I think, like 9 months and haven't found one. And it's not easy to hire people, especially when you're on a very limited budget. But being on a very limited budget is an excuse to not hire people. My budget is probably more limited than anybody else watching the stream. There might be a couple people that have a worse budget of literally $0 because they have no income, they have no nothing kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They have somebody allowing them to sit at their house and watch the internet and buy food for them. They have parents or family or friends that will take care of them, but nothing else. And that would be a worse case than mine, but my case, since we're on this topic, I'll go ahead and tell you what my case is. My case is I'm on SSI disability, and SSI disability gives me 700 and I think it's $10 a month to live on, and I have to pay my rent, I have to pay electric bill, I have to pay storages, I have to for my stuff and I have to have two of them because one of them was not big enough. The first one I rented. I have to pay for internet. I have to pay for all my games that I buy. I have to pay for all my computer upgrades that to keep my studio working. And the thing is just after the basic bills and everything, my $700 turns down to like $100. So I have $100 to work with, period. And part of that money's got to go to food that my food stamps doesn't cover, and part of it's got to go to toilet paper so I can wipe my own ass. And that $100 is going a whole lot of different directions. And if I want to order a pizza, that's $5 to $15 off of that thing for that off that $100 for the entire month. So there's a lot of things coming out of that $100, and I took part of that, saved it up, and just kept on saving it, and now I have enough money that I can hire people.
Mm-hmm.
And being on a limited budget is very, very hard. I know that firsthand, but that's not an excuse for not hiring people,
And
for
again,
being a solo developer. It's not an excuse. It's
the consumer doesn't care.
yeah,
They do not care about your sad story. And I'm just being very blunt here because developers will, pour their hearts and souls out on, post-mortems, and they'll say to their friends on Twitter or on game dev forums. And other developers will emphasize with you, the consumer will not.
yeah.
And
Because
you have to understand that.
nobody cares about that stuff for Neon Continuum. Nobody.
Hmm.
And the fact is I know that. So I have to overcome it myself. It's a personal hurdle that I have to overcome. And I think I'm doing a damn well job with Neon Continuum, considering that fact, because basically I am building the game on such a low budget that is unheard of for the entire industry. Now that does mean I'm underpaying people who work for me, but I aim to pay them properly if I'm able to by getting the game to market, having it succeed, and be able to have money that I can actually pay them with. You can't get nothing. You can't get something from nothing. You can't get blood from a rock. But you know I can, but I'm paying them enough that they are happy enough with it that if they don't get a single more dime, they're satisfied. They're not getting paid pennies by any means, but they're also not getting paid fair wages, kind of thing. It's like it's kind of like I don't know what would be a good analogy. It's kind of like you really want to be an engineer. Your dream is to be an engineer. So I let you be an engineer, but I'm not going to pay you engineer rates. I'm going to pay you McDonald's minimum wage rates. And
Hmm.
because you get the experience, because you really want to do the thing, that is acceptable enough for them that they're happy enough with that pay if that's all they get. But if the engineering project succeeds, kind of thing, then they will be properly compensated in
Hmm.
bonuses.
Yep. But we are about to hit 2 hours, so I think it's about time to wrap things up for this week's show.
Yeah, it's been a long one.
Mhm. So I really don't have any more final points. I think we've kind of hammered home that success doesn't happen in a vacuum. And you have to be able to look at everything, the good and the bad, if you want to try and succeed. And again, just because one game did something successful does not mean anywhere that if you do that, you will succeed.
Mm-hmm. And just because you have limitations or you want to make excuses is not going to change the result in the end.
Mhm.
Because if you're making excuses, then you're just throwing your possibility away. So the only thing those excuses do, you know, is they give you peace of mind until you release, and then your whole glass house shatters because you find out that that over the last 3 years of development, you've been throwing thousands of stones every day at that glass house, and there's not a piece of the glass that's bigger than a I don't know what's something really dang small, smaller than a
People,
penny.
uh,
Some it's no, there's not a piece of glass bigger than a eraser tip on the end of a pencil left of it when you release, and you end up with a horrible thing that doesn't make pocket change, does not even probably make your Steam $100 back.
all right. But I think with that, let's wrap things up for this week. So, as always, thank you so much for everybody watching this live or recorded. If you want to catch these shows live, we do them Sundays, starting around 4:30 ET. And for the Thursday shows, they are done around 3:30 ET.
Mm-hmm. And make sure to make sure to lick the smash
Lick the
button
mic,
and smash the lick button on both Josh's
lick it
channel
like him.
and my channel. And links to each other's channels and links to each other's discords. Join our discords, all that stuff, Twitter, everything. That's all linked down in the description of both of our videos. So you should be able to find both of our discords, both of our channels, both of everything down in the description. And don't make excuses.
And I'm going to try and post the recordings at least once every week from these live shows. I've been trying to do a little bit more in terms of editing to try and like cut them down, make them a little bit more focused. So
Mm-hmm.
that's taking more time to actually do all that. But I should have last week's show up for Monday.
And for
If
anybody who came in late, be sure to go back and watch the whole entire thing.
and do all the clicking.
Yep.
All right. Well, like I said, we will be back later tonight for our regular game stream and next week for another topic. If you'd like to suggest one for us to cover, of course, let us know in either the comments or the discords. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And until next time, take care.
Keep your clickers clicking and see ya.